Okay, so I'm very pleased to announce or to introduce Jean Taylor. She's going to be presenting on lessons learned from a high school overseas trip. Thank you. You can feel free to start.
Okay, thank you, Allison. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I notice a few people have your video on. That's wonderful. If you keep your video on, I really appreciate it. Actually, I'd prefer to feel like I'm talking to faces out there on the screen and not just a black computer screen, but I understand if you want to turn your video off too, of course. Is there anyone out there who's a high school teacher or anywhere else? Guess that's a no.
Junior high school.
I'm high school. Yes, I'm high school. So this presentation, I think, is of more interest to people who work in the high school system, but I hope that people in universities might find it interesting as well. So anyway, without further ado, let's start off here. So the title of the presentation is Learn from One School's 2-week homestay California program in California. And that school would be the school that I was working at for about 6 years. Yeah, so presentation outline, very simply, quick introduction, talking about the surveys that I did, 4 big takeaways from those surveys, and then finally the implications from my research or from this study for us as teachers. So I'll start off very quickly with a few key words about overseas high school trips in Japan. And this is data from 2017, which was the most recent data I could come up with. There's a few proper nouns there, some figures, numbers. Anybody want to unmute yourself and hazard a guess at what some of those names might refer to? Any courageous people out there? Okay, well, I'll throw out a few things here and see if that's what you had come up with as well. The 156,000 is the number of students per year in Japan that go on overseas high school trips. As you probably know, just about every school, in every high school, the second-year students go on a big school trip somewhere. For, I guess, 86% of the students, that's somewhere in Japan, but for 14%, it is overseas, which ends up being 156,000 students. It's a big number. Of public schools, 10% go away overseas, and the most popular destination is Taiwan for 4 days is the average. Now for private schools, it's a little bit more of a trip. So about a third of them go overseas, and Australia is the most popular choice for about a week. In my own case, I was at a private school in Shizuoka, and we went to California. The kids went to California for just over 2 weeks, and that involved about 160 students. So it was a big trip, and they were pretty lucky to be able to go for 2 weeks like that. And it was basically a compulsory trip unless, of course, there was some, or you had an illness. But other than that, basically everybody went on the school trip. So I was curious. I had taught these kids once a week for 4 years, I guess. And then in the 5th year, and anyway, before the school trip, you would kind of have impressions like maybe they weren't so interested in going on the trip, or maybe they were, and I was wondering about my own classes. Are my classes helpful to them when they go to California? A survey before they went on the trip and after they came back from the trip to find out how my classes might have impacted them or how the trip impacted them. So I'll just skip over to the literature review on this topic. And with so many students going per year and it involving 900 schools per year in Japan, you would think that there would be quite a bit of research out there on this topic. But actually there is, the reason being, of course, that high schools don't have, research. Doing research at high schools is not a part of the way that things work. There is quite a bit of research with university programs. However, it's difficult to really extrapolate the conclusions from the university studies to the high school situation for various reasons. One being the length of time spent abroad. This was just for 2 weeks, the university study here. The sample size, I was dealing with 160 kids. A lot of the university studies are just focused on a handful of kids, really, maybe at most a dozen. The university studies tend to be an overseas study abroad program, whereas this is just a 2-week stay, so it's kind of more of a trip than a really overseas study experience, although they do go to ESL classes when they're in California. And finally, a lot of the university studies, the kids stay in dormitories overseas, whereas in the high school case, they all stayed in homestays, and there were 1 student per homestay. Finally, with the university kids and the university studies, almost all of those kids go abroad because they want to go abroad. They're English majors, or they want to go to Australia or in Canada. In the high school situation, they really have no choice. They go there because it's part of their high school curriculum to go. So the motivation is really different. So in general, there was really almost nothing, no studies out there. The most relevant were these 5 people and their studies, particularly the first one there, Mr. Otsuka Kengichi. He took students, he researched students, they were also high school students, so that was the same. However, in his case, the kids stayed 2 kids per homestay, whereas in my case, it was just 1 kid per homestay, so that was kind of different. Okay, so go on to the study a little bit here. The first survey I did in 2019, and I gave it to, 164 students. It's not a particularly high-level high school that I was at, but most of the kids will go to university. And then also to this international studies stream, 28 kids. These kids were really keen to speak English, and that's why they were in that stream. And I gave them the survey twice, once before the trip, the very last class before the trip in November, and when they came back, the first class after the trip. And the survey itself was 12 questions. I'll put them up here on the screen. Difficult to see, but I can enlarge that a bit here, like that. So these were statements, and the students responded to the statements on that kind of standard 6-point Likert scale, from I strongly disagree to the strongly disagree with this statement, slightly disagree, strongly disagree, somewhat agree, and strongly agree, kind of a standard Likert scale. The 12 statements. And the statements were kind of all over the place because I didn't have a particular research question in mind. I didn't want to just research anxiety. I didn't want to just research homestay. Just kind of wanted to throw out a whole bunch of statements out there and see how the kids would respond and what the surveys would say. So I like to speak English. I basically put in, because I was thinking that would correlate with their anxiety about the homestay. this was one thing I was interested in. I had heard kind of anecdotally that a lot of kids were really freaked out about the homestay. They really didn't want to stay in a homestay, 2 weeks in a stranger's house, perhaps a different, different culture, maybe even a different race. Race can sometimes be an issue, actually, sadly. People don't really go and stay at people's houses. So the homestay was a big issue. So I kind of put in number one, I like to speak English, just thinking that this answers to this would probably give you a good indication of the anxiety that they felt about the homestay. And then I also put in questions down here about my class, because I really didn't know, I've been teaching them from April to November once a week. Have they found these classes effective? Has it helped them? Anecdote, it had. The students seemed to be positive, really positive about the classes when they came back, but is that just my impression, or is that based on facts? So anyway, just kind of a whole bunch of things here. Now let me get out of this magnifying screen. How do I do that? There we go. So these were the 12 statements. Oh, sorry, I'll just go back there. Parentheses there, that would have been the January statement. So in November, they had for example, the statement, I'm glad our school trip is for 2 weeks in California pre-trip. And when they came back, the statement was, I'm glad our school trip was for 2 weeks in California. Okay, that's pretty evident probably, but just thought I should mention that. Okay, so when the questionnaires came back in November before they left, this is the sort of response. And again, I'll enlarge that. I've circled the answers in pink just to make it a little bit easier to see. Originally, I had put name on it, but I realized before I gave it to them that it should probably just be the school number. So anyway, so this was kind of a standard answer. You have, I like to speak English, disagree. Now this really blew me away because there were a lot of people who answered agree, and I don't know, call me clueless, but I really didn't expect that. The classes were fun to teach, nice kids, positive, always positive classroom atmosphere. So I really didn't think that a lot of people would answer disagree to that statement. So number one, actually, that statement became kind of the focus of the study as I went on. So a lot of things are really like disagree. I'm glad I'll have this homestay. Nope. For 2 weeks, but disagree, disagree, disagree. Kind of positive about the class maybe, but not so great. So that was in November. And then when they came back, this is the sort of response I saw this is the exact same student. Post-trip, wow, you can just see totally different. We've got strongly agree. And down here just to show, whoops, sorry about that. Down here just to show that the student wasn't automatically circling the right side of the page. I had big problems communicating with my host family in California, strongly disagree. So they were, looking at these questions and answering them honestly. So yeah, this became really interesting to me, especially number one there. How did somebody go from disagree, I like to speak English, strongly agree? So I had all these responses and 164, but what I found is that these international studies stream kids were already interested in English anyway. Before the trip, they said they loved English. When they came back, they said they loved English. Before the trip, they said they really want to go to California, and when they came back, they said they're really glad they went to California. So I ended up taking that data out of my research because it wasn't interesting. What was interesting were these kids in the academic stream and how they went from being negative before the trip to really positive afterwards. And then the following year, I did a similar survey, and I just did it with the academic stream. And this time I did it 3 times. I did it in the first class that they had, and then also November and January. Why did you do it in April? I was interested to see if my classes from April to November had also been able to maybe positively influence them or not. So that was the reason for that. The questions were a little bit different. I'll enlarge this a bit here. I kept number 1 because that was of interest to me. I went down here, 9, 10, 11, and 12. I was kind of interested before they went to California and what they actually enjoyed, because really from April to November, if you had asked them, are you excited about going to California? And they said yes, and why, the reason would have been Disneyland. I want to go to Disneyland. California Disneyland has this Cars attraction or something that Tokyo Disneyland doesn't have, and you know, that just seemed to be so exciting for them, Disneyland. But when they came back, you know, they liked Disneyland, but again, anecdotally, I think that Disneyland was what had made them so positive about California and about their trip overseas. So I was a little bit curious about Disneyland and other things before and after. Okay, so how about the results? So I had my takeaway. I have 4 main takeaways from the results of the surveys. And one is that they enjoy speaking English more. Post-trip, they definitely enjoyed speaking English more than pre-trip. So let's look at that data. Here is the first survey. And the statement was, I like to speak English. Pre-trip, you had basically half and half. Pink are the 3 agree, somewhat agree and strongly agree. And then your brown are your 3 levels of disagree. And basically 50-50. I've got half the kids who say no, don't like to speak English. And then post-trip, this is what suddenly occurs. Half of these kids change. Half of these kids who say they disagree, they don't like to speak English, now go into this agree category. So that's quite something. Similar results in 2019. I like to speak English in April. Now that did move up a little bit. In November, I was able to push some kids up a little bit, but 2 weeks in California pushed them up the same degree, if not more. So my 8 months or so of teaching them had the same results as just 2 weeks in California. So again, here you had 1 out of 3 kids who said they didn't like to speak English before the trip. And of those kids, 1 out of 3 of these kids went into this positive category. I think the results speak for themselves. This trip was successful and definitely made the kids enjoy speaking English more. And what I thought was particularly interesting was it was even the kids who I call the reluctant speakers, the kind of hardcore, I'm not interested in English, I don't want to speak English, I don't like to speak English people. It wasn't just the kids who were kind of like, well, I guess I maybe don't really like English so much, and they've changed to, well, yeah, I guess I kind of like English. It was even the were really set in their opinions that they do not like to speak English. Even those kids became much more positive. So let's look at that data in a little bit of detail. Down here at the bottom, I've got strongly disagree, disagree, somewhat disagree, and then the 6 points on the Likert scale there. So again, the statement is I like to speak English. So pre-trip, you had 32 kids, only disagree section. They do not like to speak English. And then post-trip, those 32 kids have become 11. So 2 out of 3 of them have moved upwards, into a much more positive frame of mind towards speaking English. 2019, the results weren't quite as dramatic, but they were also significant. 20 kids in that category of not speak English became 9, so 50% drop, and then they've moved up a little bit here. And just to look a little bit closer at these, what I call the reluctant speakers. So you've got 32 kids in 2018 who fit that category, and then 2019 is 20, total of 52 students. So looking at the bottom, the meaning of these colors, how do they move? The number on the far left means they've gone down 1 point. They've gone from, for example, disagree to strongly disagree. And then the second category is there's been no change. And then these 4 categories here, they've all moved in a positive direction, 1 point up, 2 points up, 3 points up, 4 points up, again, in the Likert scale, right? So for example, these 3 kids here, these 3 kids here on the far right, they've gone up 4 points. So they've gone either strongly disagree to agree, or from disagree to strongly agree. 2019, again, we've got to move in the positive direction. So if we look at that overall, of 52 kids, only 16 have not moved or have gone down. So you've got 36 kids who have moved in a positive direction. These reluctant speakers, these kids who really didn't want to speak English, have been affected in a positive way. Going on to the next slide. So then I wonder, what caused this speaking, what I'm going to call the speaking switch, the interest in speaking English, what caused that to flip on? So I looked at these 52 reluctant speakers and I gave them a qualitative questionnaire. It wasn't actually a questionnaire, it was just a piece of paper. It said, I've noticed from your results, you are much more interested in English now than you were before. Why do you think that happened? And I didn't give them any hints. I didn't say, do you think it was because of the homestay? Do you think it was because of Disneyland? Do you think it was because of eating American hamburgers? It was just completely wide open, a blank piece of paper. Why do you think that happened? And then I looked at the responses, and some of the kids wrote in Japanese, some of the kids wrote in English. And I looked at the responses, analyzed them, and I came up with 3 main reasons as to why these kids became interested in English. So if there's anyone there who's still listening, anybody want to hazard a guess of why you think kids a 2-week homestay in California may have made kids more interested in speaking English, these reluctant speakers? Anyone feel like unmuting themselves and throwing out a guess there? Oh, Pinar is raising her hand. Yes, great.
Maybe in face-to-face classrooms, nor shy, but now they're feeling better.
Why do you think they're feeling better? Pinar, why do you think they feel better?
Oh, because they're not face-to-face and they're just like us right now, and maybe they're feeling a little bit more self-confident.
Oh, they are face-to-face. They've gone to California.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, are they face-to-face? Sorry.
Yeah, this was actually, this survey is everything. I finished this in January and did the PowerPoint, did the research, and then like the next day COVID hit, and and all the, incredibly, the timing in this. Yeah, no, they went to California. They were there for 2 weeks with the family. and then they've come back and they're feeling positive.
I can hazard a guess from
Sure.
having taken high school students as well. I think the connection with the family is really
Okay.
important, and especially if there's kids, because you don't have to worry about your English being perfect.
Right. Connection with the family. That could be. I'll keep you guessing, but that could feature, yes. Anybody else? Kyle?
I was just gonna maybe venture a guess as to maybe seeing and using the language in like a real life context in California, maybe even with the seeing the signage, maybe going to restaurants and
Yes.
actually hearing and seeing and using it in the
Yes.
different contexts they were exposed to could be a potential.
Well, I'll say that those are two of the three. But the first one, the one that was actually mentioned most often, is neither of those two. And like you guys, I would have guessed what you said, the connection with the family, seeing and using the language in a real context. I would have thought that. But in fact, what students mention a little bit more often than that was something else.
What about survival? They don't have to worry so much about getting it right, but they need to communicate in order to get something done. So their expectations of themselves have been lowered a lot.
Okay. Yes, that kind of features in other points maybe, but well,
Maybe
I'm sure you're all dying of suspense, so let me click out here. I've got, let me make the screen a little bit different. Here we go. Okay, so I've come up with 3 things. What caused the speaking switch to flip on for these reluctant? And number 1 was improved skills. Number 2 was real outcomes, as Kyle mentioned. I think it was Kyle. These real outcomes. And the personal interaction that Allison was talking about. So I'm going to bombard you with more slides and data about these 3 things and comments that the students have made. So hang in there if you will. First one, improve skills. Now this may be a no-brainer for most. To be honest, I didn't really think of it. To me, I think you enjoy something because it's fun. So I think my classes were pretty fun. If I had asked the students, you know, do you enjoy the class? Or the class is fun? They would have said yes. But something being fun maybe doesn't necessarily mean you like it. So anyway, just hang in, bear with me and see where I go with this one. So improve skills. So the question was, why do you think you like English more? I improved during the school trip. This is one student's comment. And the second one here says they're fortunate to learn some English words and they were able to find it fun to speak English when they became able to understand what others were saying. So they had to reach a certain level before you could find it fun. And as I was thinking about this, just a few years ago, my son was taking his driver's test. And, you know, you forget, I've been driving for 40 years. And it's fun to drive. And you forget, when you're first learning to drive, it's not fun. You know, you got so many things going on in your head. Which way do I look? Which lever do I, you know, pull now? Oh my God, there's somebody coming up on the left. What do I do? So those things, once driving becomes automatic, once you've got the skills down, then it's fun. But at first, when you're learning something, it's not fun and you might not like it. So anyway, analogy kind of made sense with me that you need to be at a certain level to enjoy something. And this may be particularly so with a certain mindset of students. There are probably some students out there who don't really care, but other people who are a little bit more risk adverse, maybe a little bit more, maybe shyer, maybe more introverted, they don't feel happy unless they feel confident in their skills. Some more comments there. It became fun the more I spoke. So more practice leads to greater skills, which leads to greater enjoyment. Okay, I'll go on. The second one here, real outcomes, as Kyle was saying. I'll just go back there before I show that. Sorry. Again, thinking about driving, if you can drive, that's great. But if you're just driving around that track at the drive, it's not so fun. Who cares, right? I'm not going to enjoy that. But once you're able to leave the driving school and pick up your friends, hop in the car, take them to the beach or something, then it becomes really fun when you can use your skill to achieve a real outcome. So these were some of the comments that the students made that alluded to that. Before I went on the school trip, even if I studied English, I had no place to use it. So there was no real outcome for it. Opportunities arose in California. Student number 2, they never had the chance to put it to use. And suddenly they could. They've got the road signs, they're talking with people. And by using English in my life, I got to know the happiness of being able to speak it. I thought I can use what I've studied and understood the meaning of taking lessons. So, the penny dropped, right? They see it. This is what it's all about, and it becomes fun. Just throw some more quotes up here. Number 5, I love, I think this was actually written in English too. This was the student's English comment. I experienced joy from having my English convey things. Okay, so that was number 2. And then number 3 here, the thing that made it the reluctant speakers become interested in speaking English was the human and the host mother. It was so much fun talking with my host mother. Number 3, again, the host mother. Day by day, I could talk with my host mother for longer periods, and I had a feeling of fun. This human connection. I hated English at first, but for the first time, I was in contact with foreign people and was really moved by speaking with them. Actually, yesterday I was listening to Tomlinson, I think his name was Professor Brian Tomlinson, give a talk at JALT. It was very interesting. And he was talking about how really learning, you need the affective component to learn and to want to learn and to have learning stick. It needs to move you in some way. It needs to make you laugh or cry or have an emotional reaction. So just now when I see the student's quote, it kind of makes me think of that. I was in contact with foreign people and was really moved by speaking with them. So they had this reaction. And the switch went on. I made American friends by using English. A very simple comment, but really that's at the heart of it, isn't it? Why do we have language? We have language so that we can make connections with other people. If we were all living on our own little island, we would have no need for language, but we have language in order to reach out to other people. Okay. That was the first takeaway about reluctant speakers becoming more interested in English. That was quite long. The next 3 takeaways are much shorter. Students, my takeaway number 2 from the survey results is that students' confidence increased as a result of their trip. Again, this may seem like a no-brainer, but actually in the 80s, there was oh, yeah, sorry, no, that's a different, ignore that. Yeah, no, it was, there was a survey in the 80s, there was a study in the 1980s which indicated that actually students' confidence will not increase as a result of a short trip, a 2-week trip. You really need three months or 6 months to have any effect on students' confidence. And that study was quite influential, and many people kind of quoted it for 10 or 20 years. And then around 20 years ago, people started saying, wait a second, and they came out with more research which showed that yes, in fact, of course, confidence will increase even if it's only a short trip. So anyway, my survey results supported that as well. Okay, so this was the statement here. I feel more confident speaking English now than I did at the beginning of April. Before the trip, 3/4 of the students are saying yes, I do feel more confident, but actually 1 out of 4 are like, no, sorry. I've had 25 classes or so of English communication, but to be honest, I do not feel more confident. 2 weeks later, what happens is that figure is completely changed. This hardcore group here, 1 out of 4 kids, has been reduced by 75%, and there's very few people who do not feel more confident now. Again, I gave qualitative surveys to people whose reactions changed a lot like that, and these were some of the comments I heard. So this person says, I went to a place where everything from eye color to lifestyle was different. And gradually words started to come out of me and I grew confident in myself. Just kind of this interesting comment, an interesting transition. And I'll put all these 4 up here. They became confident. This person says, I became confident since I could communicate even if my grammar wasn't perfect. Allison was sort of mentioning that, I think, in her comment. The grammar is not so important, and that this person more confidence. Okay, I think we'll go on there. We'll go on to the comment that confidence, it can coexist with nervousness and realism. So just even though you're more confident, it doesn't mean that you think you are totally the best English speaker ever. So I feel nervous when I speak English. April, November, January, figures did not really change. They still feel nervous. It doesn't go away. And I am good at English. Again, pre-trip and post-trip, no difference, basically. Interestingly, there was a little bit of difference here from April to November. I'm good at English. More people did feel that, yes, I'm good at English. And I think that's kind of a realistic assessment. They have had 6 more months of classroom, normal Japanese teacher English, and also my communication classes. And they have improved a little bit and they are a little bit better. Okay, so those were the 2 first takeaways. The second one was about confidence. I think we're on to the third one here. Yes, the third one is that their oral comprehension skills are boosted. They're better at listening, to put it more easily. I am able to understand spoken English more now than I could at the beginning of April. Most kids did see before trip, yes, my spoken English, my oral comprehension has improved. Post-trip, wow, this has just gone up incredibly. Virtually 100% of the kids say yes. And this group here, 16 kids had, these numbers are a percentage. I had 136 kids or so in the survey, but I reduced it all to percentages. So these 16% of kids who felt no has been reduced just to 2%. And these were some comments that the students said, which indicate that their oral comprehension were boosted. Gradually, they're able to understand more. At first, I couldn't catch what my host mother was saying. Gradually, I got used to it. So there is definitely an improvement. And my final takeaway here is that homestays have a huge impact on the students' positive on the trip and on the students' enjoyment of the trip. And this was interesting because before the trip, there were a lot of kids who were worried about the homestay. And since it was basically a compulsory trip, I actually knew kids, I'd heard, of other kids who did not apply to our school because of the trip. They really didn't want to do this homestay. So there is I knew there was a lot of apprehension and worry about the homestay. So let's look at what the data shows. There's initial resistance, as I said. So this statement here, I'm glad our trip is for 2 weeks in California. And the second statement is about the homestay. So 76% of kids are glad about going to California for 2 weeks, but only 3 out of 5 are glad to have the homestay. So the homestay is perceived much more negatively than the trip itself. However, post-trip, we see some satisfaction here. I'm glad our school trip is for 2 weeks in California. Yes, definitely 90%. How about the homestay? Very similar, quite comparable response. 88% of kids are glad. So really quite an increase. Students are worried about this homestay. They don't want to go, but in fact, 88% of kids have a great time. And 2019, there were similar, similar kind of findings. In April, I'm glad our school trip is to California. They're really excited about that. And pre-trip, even more excited. And post-trip, yes, 95% of the kids are glad they went. About the homestay, excuse me. Wow, look at that. Only half of the kids basically are glad about the homestay in April. Now, by the time we get to November, their homeroom teacher has been able to talk it up a bit. I've been able to talk it up a bit, talking to their older senior students has probably had a positive impact. And you've got 3 out of 4 kids who are looking forward to the homestay, but you still have 1 out of 4 kids who really are not. But then look at that. After the trip, in fact, 90% of the kids are really pleased they had the trip. So I have to say it's really a successful experience. So why do they have, what's the worry? What's the anxiety about this homestay? What's the problem? What are these communication fears? They have fears. Yeah, I think I will have big problems communicating with my host family in California. Before the trip, 2 out of 3 kids say, yeah, I'm just worried about it. But actually the reality after the trip is only 30% did feel that they experienced big problems. So 7 out of 10 kids really do not have what they would call big problems. And even with these 30%, I think a lot of the big problem is actually not such a big problem because, as you saw from the previous data, 90% of the kids are really glad that they went on the homestay. So it is a positive experience. So again, I surveyed the kids, the kids who were really, worried about going on the homestay before. They came back, they said they loved it. I gave them, again, a page to tell me why. Why do you think it was positive? Why were you scared before? And why did it end up being good? And, oh, sorry, okay. Well, that's later on. I guess that's another slide. Same story in 2019. April and November, they're worried. They come back. It was great. They did not feel stressed. Okay, so here we go. Why? What's the anxiety? There's different reasons. They've never used the English before, so they feel anxious. They've got stranger anxiety, maybe. They're worried about spending 2 weeks in someone else's house. Yeah, okay, I can get that. They have a negative preconception of Americans. Excuse me. Movies, yeah, you might get that from the movies or the news. Scary or rough. Maybe your character, you're just reluctant to try new things. I just don't want to go. I really hated the whole idea of the homestay. And then finally, you're worried about the unknown. What am I going to do if the homestay family is not great? What will I do? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. But in fact, it was a great family. These homestay families, I should say, are are arranged by the community college, the junior college or community college in California. So the kids were in California for 2 weeks, and they went to this community school for the 2 weeks for ESL classes. And then the community college arranged homestay families. And you can see kind of a progression in the attitudes towards the kids. Little by little, they feel more relaxed about the homestay through the year. Okay, final comments from the students on their homestay. I think I have 2 comments here. One is, yes, about the father. So the father, you know, he had taught ESL overseas. And the kid had a lot of listening practice at the home. This one here, she said, I'm going to read this all. I grew to like English because of my host family. When I traveled in Malaysia, I experienced that my English skill was made a fool of. Now that's probably, she's going shopping, the people are not understanding her, and it ends up being a really negative experience. In fact, I couldn't speak and understand English well, and I was shocked. And because of this negative experience, I didn't like speaking English. So those are the kind of experiences you might get, you know, at a shop or at a fast food place, or maybe a stranger on the street. But in a homestay, these people are like your mother and your father in a way, your brother and your sister, and they're kind to you. They're not going to insult you. They're going to be supportive, and that's something that a family can offer to the kids that they're not going to get by just going shopping and talking to the clerk at the shop. Okay, so here we are at the end. What have we learned about overseas school trips from this? So my summary of what I've been trying to talk about here is that it does have a huge impact. It has a huge impact in the kids' attitudes towards speaking English, their confidence level, and their oral comprehension. And that homestays are a key element to all. They really are. They underline a lot of these positive results. And then the very final slide here is, what is the takeaway for our own teaching from this? And way back when, earlier on in this presentation, I talked about 3 key factors in upping students' motivation to speak English. They got improved skills, and they achieved real outcomes, and they have personal interactions. And the wonderful thing about these 3 things is that you don't have to go to California to achieve this. And this was wonderful a year ago when I wrote this, when I did this study and wrote the presentation. I thought this was wonderful, but it's particularly relevant now when you really can't take your students to Singapore, you can't take them to Australia, you can't take them to Canada. So anyway, what made students interested in speaking English? Improved skills, real outcomes, and personal interactions. And these are all things that we can achieve in our own classroom. We can have activities which will give them improved skills, which will, you know, create real outcomes. We can design fun activities, and which can have real personal interactions. You don't need Disneyland to have kids become positive towards speaking English. So my final, my final thing I want out to you people is, how can we achieve those results in our own classrooms? How can you, how can we, how can I create a classroom, create activities, create an atmosphere which will lead to improved skills, real outcomes, and personal interactions? And where will you go from here? So thank you very much. That is basically it.
Okay.
A long one. No, it's a long one, a lot of slides and a lot of talking. Thank you for staying with me.
No, that was excellent. A lot of detail. I love the way you focused on follow-up interviews with the students who were reluctant speakers at first. I think the quotes tell us a lot about their experience. If it's okay with you, can I unmute everyone and then we can open it up to a discussion? I'm trying to find the button. Everyone, please feel free to unmute yourselves. Sorry, it's just taking me a minute here. Oh, okay. Okay, does anyone have any questions for Jean? You can either type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. If no one has a question, maybe I'll go first.
Pinar and Brett. Okay. Pinar had her hand up first, I think.
Okay,
Pinar?
go.
Yeah. Pinar, is it Pinar?
I just wanted to give an applause to you.
Oh, thank
Yes.
you. Okay. Brad, did you have a question or was that?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. So your question at the end is, I think, very useful for all of us, really, which is looking at how to, take some of these learnings into our classrooms in this local environment here. The question I have for you is, in terms of reducing anxiety, like that was a big thing that happened for these students. How did you change your teaching, if you did, once you realized that anxiety was such a big thing for them abroad? Like, how did you help to prepare, say, future students for going abroad based on that?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I just finished it in January and then, literally COVID hit the next day. And we were online and I changed schools, actually. I'm at a new school from April. And all of these great exchanges, which we had lined up, were all canceled. So I have not actually done anything at all with that. And I guess I should have the year before, because I did the surveys for 2 years. So the first year, I don't know, I always try to be friendly to the students, but I gave this talk to via Zoom to a couple of chapters, actually. And one person mentioned about, maybe it would be good to have the seniors, the kids who went the year before, talk kind of one-on-one with the ones who are going to go, and that would, would alleviate some of their anxiety.
Yeah. Just as a little micro answer to that, that's what I was thinking exactly, because I do a lot of programs like this and bringing in the previous leaders.
Right.
To sort of talk about that, which really does help to alleviate the worries and the concerns of the future groups. So that's something that does work well. Yeah, thank you.
I think they always did that. Like, I think they do that. But, there are a few horror stories, right? So kids hear about that. They hear about the family who, only have one toilet and 7 people in the house or something. Like toilets, laundry. I think kids stress about things like that, and food. Of course, the food. A lot of kids are pretty, narrow in what they want to eat. Don't want to eat anything spicy. What do you mean there's no rice, right? So it can be an issue.
I've also had problems with the shower versus bath issues. Students wanting to take a bath late at night, right before bed, and when people might be asleep. Yeah.
Jean, may I ask then, like, if that is an ongoing issue, what is actually done to brief these kids on what they can encounter? Like, if they're asking a question like, what do you mean there's no rice? And that happens every year. What is actually done to help these kids understand, we're going to Mexico and they do have rice. They just don't eat it the way you do. Wherever, It's actually done to tell them, most people in America shower. They don't bathe.
Yeah. I was just a part-time teacher. So although I was there 5 days a week, so I didn't go on the trip with the kids and I didn't attend all the meetings and things like that. But I think there are for sure lots of, this is Japan, people over prepare, right? They don't just suddenly say, oh, we're going next week. It starts way back in April. Long homerooms, you know, once a week. And in Japanese high schools, they have what's called a long homeroom. And they talk about these things.
So
yes.
I guess it's just the kids weren't listening at the time or something then, or they just didn't really realize the information was being put in front of them.
Well, I think they were listening, but they just don't want that. They want to have their bath at night. You know,
Right.
so hearing that, yeah, a lot of families just have showers. They don't even actually have a bath in the house. That maybe doesn't make people feel relaxed because they want to have a bath. Right? Yeah.
Another one we found was closing bedroom doors. We had to tell the students to leave their doors open because in Japan, people would even like, you close the door to say, please don't come in. You leave the door open to make it, you know, welcoming for people to come in and talk to you.
Right.
So I had a question about what you used for your materials. Did you have a textbook that the school provided you with? Like, were you stuck with a curriculum, or did you use more survival skills?
I could do whatever I wanted. So that's why I was kind of curious, is what I'm doing, you know, useful? So I kind of thought, well, what kind of skills do you want to be able to express your opinions? So, you know, some weeks we would do things which would be about expressing your opinion. Some weeks you want to be able to give information, explain things. So some weeks would be on more nuts and bolts, explaining things, giving your opinion. Yeah, all kinds of different things. More than two, definitely more than two. After they came back, we did creative story writing. So that's in my head now. We did a lot of acting out plays and things like that, but that was when I came back. Yeah, being able to explain processes.
What about like role-playing problems that might come up and how they might react?
No, I didn't do that actually. You mean like what do you do when you want laundry or something done and there's no, actually I didn't do anything California specific. And I just did it about English, about expressing yourself, and yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. We have time for maybe one last question. I'm sure you must all have tons of questions. You're just being shy.
Kyle had his hand up at one point, but
Okay,
Well,
Kyle?
yeah, I think you kind of already touched on it. So I just wanted to say thank you for your presentation and all your great work you did with it over the couple of years you were looking at it. But I guess, did you have any specific projects pre-trip? If there was anything, was it related to going to California, or what type of projects you may have suggestions for learners going abroad?
what kind of sorry, the question is, what sort of projects did I do in preparation for going abroad?
Yeah. I think you had that in maybe your survey or somewhere. I wrote a note, something about projects, pre-trip projects. Was kind of curious to me as to what.
Well,
Maybe that's something to think about.
I do all kinds of maybe not really, no. Sorry, really horrible answer, but yeah. No, more just speaking and communication skills, yeah.
Right on. Thank you.
Basically not at all teacher-centered, just pairing, talking about things, trying to solve problems in groups and stuff.
Okay.
Sorry.
That was an excellent, very informative and detailed presentation. And I'm sure people would love to hear from you again next year if you have a chance to go abroad, or if there's a way of recreating it in your classes without the going abroad experience. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, everybody, for...
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. And can we
Everyone,
have
how about
another
a
round of applause?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, everybody. Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
I wish we had more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
プロジェクトの、JavaScript